welcome to episode number one. That's right. This is our inaugural podcast episode called Beyond the Inflection Point, hosted by Marion Street Capital. I'm Sean Heberling, founder and CEO of Marion Street Capital. We are a management consulting firm whose mission is helping innovative growth companies solve their most pressing challenges. The purpose of this podcast is to educate our audience on interesting business owner stories, the story behind the founding of those businesses, and the stories behind some of the inflection points that those businesses have experienced. With me today is Nicole Rife, founder, CEO, owner of the Rife Group, a division of the Compass Group in Bluebell, Pennsylvania. Is that right, Nicole?
It is, yes. I mean, our home office is in Bluebell, but we cover a big territory.
Okay, awesome. Nicole and I have known each other for at least a couple of years now. She is one of the most energetic personalities in a business owners group to which I and my firm belong, called the BCA. Nicole and I are actually working together on a deal in Philadelphia right now, and I anticipate there will be many more to come beyond that. So with that as our preamble, Nicole, why don't you tell our audience about why you decided to get into such a competitive business, the business of residential real estate, and what your thoughts are for the future of this?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me, and to be your first guest is super exciting because I always aim to be first in whatever I'm doing. So I think it just kind of parallels really nicely. You know, I got into real estate when I started investing. My former career, I was a director of sales and marketing and did a lot of events and a lot of interaction with people. And I was last working with continuing care retirement community. And I had watched these consumers come in and they had no guidance, nobody to help them. You know, how do you prepare your home for sale? You know, how do you get ready? How do you maximize value? So I saw an opportunity just as I was investing in real estate. My former agent at the time introduced me to something called the Millionaire Real Estate Agency book. And it showed me how you can take real estate and make it into a business and make it personal and not just transactional. So for the last 18 years, that's what we've really strived to do. And I am very proud of the fact that Compass recruited us as the founding partners of Montgomery County. I had never heard of Compass prior to 6.5 years ago. And in 6.5 years, it has changed not only my life, but my team members' lives, as well as the lives of our clients and the ways that we've been able to maximize their value.
Nicole, what is it that you find advantaged about working with a larger enterprise as opposed to like starting your own brokerage firm?
Yeah, so that's always a question I get a lot. Starting my own brokerage firm is not something I'm interested in. There's a lot of red tape there, and those that know me and red tape probably aren't the best combination. So in regards of why I decided to partner with Compass is when Robert Refkin, who's the founder and CEO, took time and asked to take time of 20 minutes to meet with me and my husband, who's not part of the business, but an integral part of my life. That really showed something. In the previous 12-ish years that I had been with two other firms, both local, I never had lunch with the CEO. I never had dinner with the CEO. And here was a man coming down from New York City to meet with little old me and my team. And it just spoke volumes about what he was trying to create. And there were opportunities that they were creating in an ever-changing market, something that, you know, we're going through a lot of challenges right now behind the scenes as agents and as an industry. And having a leader like Robert right now is projecting us and taking our what's the word I'm looking for? Trajectory level to the next level. You know, we went from, you know, an average sale price of $350, and now our average sale price is closer to $1 million. And that's because of the services that we can provide our clients. I think
That's a big difference.
it is. And here's the other thing though, it's not just my team and I that's gotten that. I think Compass, and this is my own personal opinion, there's no data backing this up, I think Compass has elevated the industry as a whole. If I look at what my competitors are doing, they're marketing mirrors ours, or we got there first type of scenario, and now they're doing it as well. So there's just a lot that Robert and his executive team have implemented both locally and across the country that have really elevated business. One of the big things that Compass provides is called Compass Concierge. They provide the funds up front for people that typically all their money is held within the equity of their investment. So in this case, they'll front the monies to allow us to make the improvements. And they could be minor landscaping, painting, staging, to a full kitchen renovation. And that's where then you take the price of a sale home from $350 to $500 to $550 to $650. And it's really making a big difference in people's bottom lines. It's been wonderful.
That's fantastic. Nicole, you've been a realtor through good times, challenging times. Why don't you give us a little bit of a outline as to how the last 5, 6 years have gone for you with COVID and the boom coming out of COVID, and then the aggressive increase in interest rates which put brakes on the industry, and now trying to navigate this whole tariff driven macro uncertainty. Give us a little bit of a play by play.
It's interesting. So the last 5 years have been very enlightening in a lot of ways. It's actually forced me to go back to when I started. And I started my team just about 13 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And 8 months into starting my team, I got hit by a car as a pedestrian. And I had a choice. I could either survive and figure this out and continue to employ those that trusted me, as well as the agents that were working with me, or I could throw in the towel and go back to my old career. I'm not a quitter, and kind of like our opening thing, I like to be number one. And so I said, I'm going to survive this and I'm going to make it work. And so for the first almost 6 years of since getting hit by the car, it was pure survival mode, right? Very low capital to work with. You can't go to the bank as an agent and say, hey, I'm going to start a real estate business. Can I get a loan? You can only work with what you have. You just can't get loans. And so it was pure survival. Then the pandemic hit and it was pure panic. What's going to happen? Am I still going to be employed? Am I going to be able to employ those that work with me? And so, my husband and I made a decision after I got hit by the car to go all in. When the pandemic hit, we made another decision to go all in and make sure that the people that worked for us were supported. Simultaneously with that, I suffered 3 disc ruptures and had to have 3 major back surgeries in a 6-month period. And so there's been a lot of survival opportunity. And so now this is what I call my thriving era. If I were Taylor Swift, right? This would be my thriving era. And so what we did during this time is I looked and said, okay, what's happening that's working really well in my structure and what is crumbling? And so we evaluated all those systems. And in that time, my VA and my virtual assistant and I, who has worked with me for 5+ years now, realized that the CRM is the most important part of our business, next to being with people, right? But how do you hit people in your CRM? Do you hit them all the time? Do you go once a week? What is that perfect formula? And I'm really proud of the fact that we have about 10,000 people in our system today, and only 38 people have unsubscribed. So that means we're providing content with value, as well as kind of the right mix of time. Not every other week or every week. It just, I don't send the just listeds and the just solds. If it's a very special home that I want to make sure everybody's seeing, we'll send those just listeds. But we have other outlets that people can find homes. So, I don't want to be that. I want to be a resource in other ways. So we've gone from surviving to thriving.
That's fantastic. I know I've read a few of your pieces, especially the ones kind of delving into some of the market statistics, the very localized market statistics. And I remember being able to slice and dice it, even by neighborhood within the city of Philadelphia, or at least by zip code, which was pretty interesting. What other sorts of content does your audience find interesting?
So I started my career working directly with the older adult market, and I
Mhm.
love people. Like, I talk with my hands a lot. I am half Sicilian, so sorry about that. But I just love people. I love giving people hugs. I love laughing with people. I really don't love crying with people, but I will if they need me to, So for me, it was like, how can I stay engaged with somebody after the transaction? It goes back to my earlier comment. We want it to be a personal experience and not a transaction, or not just a transaction. And so I kind of always affiliated what we do, kind of like a match.com. You have this amazing 6 to 8 week relationship. You're texting all the time, you're talking, you're sending emojis, you're doing all these things. And then you're like, okay, congratulations, I have to move on now. And I found that really sad. And I was had conversations with my former clients that now became friends and said, if there was something we could do, what would that be? And it was like, well, let's get together. So we started small. We started doing events, and this is going back 9 years now. So we started small with doing events, but then I created something called the Rife Rewards program. And this is a way that I can stay connected to every single person in my past client database, as well as sphere of influence, in a way that's coming from contribution, allowing for engagement, which then ultimately leads to one-on-one time together. And then it's just catching up, and then they say, oh, hey, my friend needs this or my friend needs that. And it's been a way to stay connected to people that really make a difference in your life. I mean, without these people, my husband and I wouldn't have the life that we have.
Uh, You mentioned you generally spend about 3 weeks before the start of each year, kind of planning out your content strategy for
I
the
do.
year. Do you deviate from that strategy during the year? Like if you see something interesting, will you throw something else out there, or what kind of adjustments might you make to that?
So in terms of, I discovered that spending 3 weeks a year at the end of every year, preparing for the year ahead, really allows me the freedom then to be a real estate agent. Um, Typically real estate agents, we don't like to be behind the computer, or we like to be with people. So I spend 3 weeks and I create all the content for the next 12 months. I write all of the content. I don't use Chat GPT. I know people make fun of me because it could be quicker. Maybe one day I will, but I love the authenticity behind who I am. And so I create this. Now, I do use an automated system. So your birthday message that you get, yes, I wrote it, but it does go out on your birthday because I researched when your birthday was. I took the time to do that. And so that has been really empowering because it's not just about the interaction, but it's about what I can learn about the other person. What do they enjoy doing? What can we do together? Taking some people to Savannah Bananas next week or 2 weeks. That's something where tickets are on hold. Like, you can't get tickets. And I have a whole suite where we're going to go and entertain our clients and friends and have an absolute ball. So that's where taking the time to prepare in advance allows me that interaction. Now, with your other question, do I ever deviate? I do, because I have to. The real estate market right now is ever changing. There's so much happening behind the scenes. There's so much misinformation because of social media, but that's in any facet, I know, but it's been very challenging to say the least. So as some information comes out, we will share that information, but we don't deviate from what we put in place because those things are very important, but we do add things as the year progresses.
Okay. And now your team sells in both Pennsylvania. You do some New Jersey
Mhm.
and Florida as well.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you've got a little bit of a view into what's going on, and then more than just a localized perspective. How do you see the residential real estate market adjusting to kind of the current level of interest rates?
So I love this question. When I got licensed, at first I got licensed in Pennsylvania, then I got licensed in Florida and then New Jersey. I wouldn't have had that. I could have always gotten licensed no matter what brokerage I was with. But because I'm with Compass, the ease and having teams in these 3 states has been very simplified because of our robust um, uh, computer management system that they provide to us. And what I see is, you know, this is gonna sound silly, but I used to watch the Millionaire Real Estate LA show. And when LA, and this is pre-pandemic because things have changed since the pandemic, but it would be about a 6-month change. So whatever they were experiencing then, we would see here in about 6 months. Well, those shows kind of went off the air with the pandemic and, unfortunately the fires that have occurred, and they're going through their own things. And so Compass providing us this information is huge. To your question, being licensed in Florida, that is a state right now where during the pandemic, they had about 3 months of inventory, meaning if everything stayed the same, no new listings, all agents would be out of business in 3 months. That means it's a seller's market. Well, today there's about 18 months of inventory. That means that in 18 months, if everything stayed the same, so that's 6 times what we were experiencing. So that's where then the prices start to level out. That's, an average healthy market. There's about 3,000 to 4,000 homes on the market. We have in Pennsylvania, particularly Montgomery County, we've had around 300, 500. We're up to around 800 now. So, the numbers are going the other way. So it's transitioning from a seller's market to more of a modest market. With that said, though, there are certain pockets that are just in such high demand, they fly off the market. Then there are other pockets where things are sitting. So right now the conversation is very difficult with sellers. Sellers want what was happening over the last 5 years. Buyers are excited because now they can do inspections again and have time to go through the process. But it's no longer competing with just yourself. You're now competing with the home down the street that's been on the market for 30 days or 20 days. And maybe they were overpriced in the beginning. Maybe their condition wasn't ideal. We don't know what those things are, but that's what we're now competing with. So it's an ever-changing market right now, and staying on top of the trends is so important.
And the other issue you and your industry seem to need to figure out how to deal with is the commission issue now too, right? Because there's been the big federal case about more transparency on fees and the ability for, I guess, buyers or sellers to perhaps request lower fees. So what's your take on that?
It's interesting. That is something that halted our business. I don't want to speak on the lawsuit because I'm not an expert in that. There's some interesting facts that Compass has provided us that are true economic facts. That's not just personal beliefs. But it's interesting that this has come about now after so many years. What I can say, Pennsylvania has been a buyer broker state since the 90s. So we've been operating buyer agency and seller agency for that entire time. So here in Pennsylvania, it's not as much of a hurdle. Florida, completely different scenario. So there are some sellers out there that say, I'm not going to pay a buyer's agent. The buyer's agent can pay the buyer can pay the buyer's agent. The reality is the buyer's always been paying the commission. It was just inflated into the price.
Right.
Right. And if you think about it, most buyers, you go with your first time or your move up buyer, they typically don't have tens of thousands of dollars sitting in the bank that they can pay above and beyond. So if you take a market where we're already believing to be overpaying, most are providing proof of cash, maybe getting a mortgage, but still providing proof of cash. So you're competing against these, and now you're saying I got to pay the buyer's agent on top of that. So most sellers still in our area are offering compensation. So from our standpoint, it has not changed too much. Now, when I say our standpoint, I can only talk about the Rife Group at Compass, can't talk about my colleagues. But from our standpoint, my agents are even stronger, and I couldn't be more proud to be in business with these particular agents because they understand their value. We're not discount brokers. We're never going to be discount brokers unless we're forced to be discount brokers. But the sacrifices that we make for our clients away from our family and our friends, we understand the value of that. And I'm not going to discount what it takes to get a house sold.
I've seen the effort that successful realtors, especially those who are essentially executives of teams, put in. I mean, it is very much running a business. And then you throw in the whole holiday, Saturday, Sunday, 24/7 responding to, a very retail type of clientele, it's not an easy business, is it?
No, we work all day just as our clients do because they need to work typically in order to buy, right? We hope they have money. And then we have to work when they're not working because that's when they have the time to have the conversations about their family and their moves. So it is 24/7 and I've literally been just on my way to dinner with my husband before, and I have to deviate, take him back home, and then I've got to go do an inspection. And not a home inspection, but like a county inspection or township inspection, because when they call, you have to go. Like it's not,
Mm.
sometimes they'll give us a heads up, but not always. The last 5 years we've been like whack-a-moles. House comes up, we're like, boop, all right, gotta go. So we've done those things and we'll continue to do those things. And that's what makes the difference between, you know, a top agent in the country or an agent who's just doing their thing.
You spend a lot of time behind the windshield, don't you?
Yes, I do. Objects in the rearview mirror are larger than they appear.
That's great, Nicole. Uh, okay. Nicole, if someone's thinking about getting into this business, what advice would you offer them?
The very first thing, and I got into this business in '08 and '09, right as things were crashing.
Mhm.
And I was very fortunate and had a very successful career early on in my previous life. To walk away from that six-figure salary to commission only was terrifying. And to make $8,000 my first year in real estate, the banks weren't happy that I had my mortgages because I had a couple investment properties. The car company wasn't happy. But I got lucky and realized something early on, that working with local really matters, because I was able to keep everything because the bank that I was affiliated with really worked with me. And I still actually work with them today because I will never forget and I'll forever be indebted to them. But the reason that I bring this up is that was a very, very difficult time, similar to now, but in a completely different way. Um, I spent the time learning. I went and met with appraisers on property sites. I went with inspectors and learned what they were going to be looking at. I met with the title company to understand what they were pulling and how they were doing that. So if I'm coming into this business again, yes, I see the shiny article or shiny objects that everybody else sees. But what I would advise anybody to do is take the time, especially your first year or two, and learn, really, really learn. Things are so fast paced right now. But if you don't understand the agreement of sale, you're not doing the best fiduciary responsibility for your client and or yourself. And you could be costing somebody, tens of thousands of dollars. I'm very proud of the fact that I spent so much time with the appraisers to understand how to value a house. I had a house in Newtown Square, and the sellers were adamant about their number, and we fought pretty well. And they actually listened to me, and we ended up getting $495,000 over ask. And we hit the number they wanted because we priced it right. If we would have
Mm.
priced it too high, we would have been chasing. So if we would have priced it too low, people would have wondered what was wrong with it. So, having that trust from people really does make a difference. And I will fight for it sometimes. If I feel that strongly about it, I will state my position. And if the seller doesn't necessarily agree, then we'll come to some term in writing that says, okay, this didn't work and this is what we agreed to, or this did work and now this is my concession. So, it's a win-win either way, because if it goes the way I'm thinking, they win, they have a bigger sale. If it doesn't go the way I'm thinking, then they have some sort of concession from me.
Okay. Nicole, I know you've got a lot of repeat business at this point. Uh, how often do you have to compete for a new client, and what is that process like?
Gee, should I say I never have to compete? No, I don't. That's false. That's false. I think I have to compete every day. Real estate agents, there are many of us out there. And somebody always knows somebody. So when somebody starts having that conversation isn't first with the agent. The conversation is first with a friend sitting at a restaurant or talking on the phone. It's like, hey, and then they say, well, you need to meet this person or you need to meet that person. A big place, people will put into social media now, I'm looking for an agent, go under anonymous, and then, then it becomes a publicity or not publicity, a population contest.
Mm.
That I don't like to compete for, because that person I find is typically looking not for necessarily the best value, but maybe the least of or the most affordable option for them, I'll say. So that's not the clients that we're looking for. We're looking for people that want full-time real estate professionals that understand the industry at a very high level, pay attention to what's going on in the market, and understand the pivots that you have to take. I have a client right now, we've been on the market, we were priced correctly, but we decided to take it off because of summer, and we're going to go back on in the fall. And they trust me with that, and that's a big deal. So
Okay.
I don't know how often I have to compete, but I know every day I don't just wake up and every day I have to go on a job interview. That's how I look at it. I need to go and meet one new person that's going to provide me an opportunity, whether it's an immediate opportunity or an opportunity 3 months from now.
God bless you. I couldn't stand job interviews.
Yeah.
I joke around. I tell people now, I don't think I would be employable.
Yeah. Well, I had one client, and it was such a happy settlement. Took them 383 days to find a home. 383 days. So we finally made a settlement. I said, "Are you guys sure?" I said, "We still have another year to go if you want to, keep the calendar going." And it was laughter and joking, and we're going to stay in contact forever. I mean, 383 days is a really long time, but that's also a byproduct of the market. Mid-level market, move up buyers, they were expanding their family. They couldn't compete with the cash. They just didn't have the resources, but they had the ability to be patient, which was nice. And they had a home. So it wasn't like they had a lease or they had to get out of their parents' house. So we were able to work with them, and it was not high pressure to them. It was at their pace. And so now they have a beautiful new home. And I just drove by the other day and was honking at them, and they were like, "Is that you honking?" I'm like, "Yep, yes, it was."
Back to marketing for a second. We talked about the overall content strategy. What platforms do you use for social media, and how important is that to your business?
Social media is becoming the number one most important platform that we have as agents. Um, I love it, and I have a not love with it at the moment. I love being able to showcase the listings. I love people being able to see in. I am not digging the comedic end of it. I love watching it and I love enjoying it. But for me, that's just not my personality. When it comes to work, I'm very, when I'm not working, it's completely different, Nicole. But when I'm working, it's, I'm very professional, I guess. So I personally am struggling with trying to keep up with the Joneses, I'll call it, the social media Joneses. But social media is becoming one of those things that if you're not relevant on social media, then you're not relevant at all. There's one woman right now, she's hysterical, and I'm not going to say her name. She's not from this state. She's not from Pennsylvania. She has millions of followers, and she is downright funny, not not appropriate in my opinion, but funny, and I love it. She sold one house for $230,000, but she's got millions of followers, and people are talking about her. The news was reporting on her. So it's like, okay, well, she's going to be relevant one day, right? And she's younger and she's new and she's very cool. I'm on the older side of this now, and it's kind of like, okay, I can't see myself making those comments and jumping on countertops. Well, I physically can't do that, but I want to showcase the properties and highlight the features. So that for me is the most important. Second thing about social media right now that's so important for us is our network. There was always that saying, "I got a guy, or I got a girl," right? And I have a past client of mine that was one of my first clients I'm never going to forget. And they would text me like, "Hey, you got a guy, who is it?" And so I would give it to them. And being part of BCA, or Business Clubs America, for 17 years has really allowed me to build relationships before I need them, which is part of why I absolutely love being part of BCA. It's their mission statement aligns perfectly with how I've always operated my life and my business. And so we're very fortunate, to have connections like you. When we were doing an auction, I was able to call you and you were able to put it together really quickly. Things like that don't just happen without relationships.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, we adopt a bit of that attitude with our clientele. We'd like to be a go-to resource. Oh, you need an attorney who specializes in Series A venture capital, or a first financing with growth stage private equity, or you need an accounting firm that's really familiar with the SaaS business model. Those sorts of things can really help clients in a very time and cost effective way.
Yeah, I made a comment early on in my career, and I'm never going to forget it because it's one of those things, open foot, insert mouth. I really wish I could take back. I had said I didn't want to be a realtor. I didn't want to be known as a realtor. And what I meant by that was I watched, and again, this was very early on. This was in my first couple of months. I would watch my colleagues at that time just collaborate amongst themselves. They weren't out meeting new people, and that was very strange to me. Here I was in my former career out doing business development over and over and over. And in this situation, I'm like, why are these people always just together? And so I made a very foolish comment, said, oh, I don't want to just be a realtor. I want to be more than a realtor. What I meant by that was I wanted to always be connected to my community, and not just within my business community. Now, what I've learned in 18 years is the reason that we collaborate is because unless you're in the business, you don't really understand the business and the
Mm.
sacrifices and what it takes and how difficult it is on all relationships, parental relationships, marriage relationships. I mean, it is very, very trying. When you make dinner plans and you got to call up your mom and dad and say, Mom and Dad, I'm sorry, I can't make it. They do take that personally. I would take that personally. So that's when I've learned to collaborate and commiserate, I'll say, with my colleagues because they understand. But I also need those outside relationships because that's I think so important. And colleagues will call me now and be like, hey, Nicole, who do you know? And I connect them, hey, Nicole, I've got an emergency pest situation. I'm calling Miley Cunningham of Cunningham Pest Control, and she's going to jump right on it. If I don't have those relationships, I'm not going to be able to service my clients the way that I want to.
That's fantastic. Nicole, maybe two more questions for you, and then we'll wrap up here. One is, what would you say your business's greatest challenge is at the moment?
The business as a whole right now, the the misconception of what Zillow is.
Mm.
For the first time in all my career, I remember going to conferences with my former brokerage, and there were some of my favorites. I went every year to Austin, and I would sit in front of these mega agents and learn from them. And it was always the owner would get the big owner of the company would get on stage and be like, all right, Zillow's going to take over one day. Stop using Zillow. Stop using Zillow. Well, as a newer agent at the time, I'm like, well, how do I build my book of business besides my sphere? But how do I build my book of business for my team without paying for leads? Well, finally, there is now somebody, actually, a couple people are pushing back hard against Zillow. And so Zillow is refusing to show private exclusive listings. That's a
Mm.
huge hurdle that we're going to have. So the question right now is Zillow going to continue to be the number one search portal for real estate? Zillow doesn't sell real estate, by the way. They just are the portal. And so it's something that, now as an experienced agent, I'm saying, do we really need Zillow? I don't know. I don't know that answer. I'm not, qualified enough to make that. But right now, there's so much happening behind the scenes like that. I know two brokerages have sued Zillow. It's a very public thing. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be very, very interesting.
No doubt. An industry that's been around for probably a couple thousand years at this
I,
point.
longer than I've been alive.
And one that maybe at another inflection point in the current era. One more question for you, Nicole, before we wrap up. I- How could our audience be helpful to you? If you could ask them for one thing, what would that be?
Oh gosh. Um, I wasn't prepared for this question. If I could ask for one thing, it would just be to always be honest, and I say that, and what do I mean? Like when I'm out with somebody and they don't need to tell me they have somebody that, knows that's looking, we can just have an authentic conversation. So for me, it's always, let's just be our authentic selves together. And if there's an opportunity to work together, we do it. Right. And or if you think, or if you know somebody that you think would be a good fit, please make the introduction. It's up to us to close the sale. So for me, I would say, if anyone knows anybody looking to buy or sell in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, or Florida, we're there. We've got you covered. And even if somebody just needs help with some guidance of how to go about things, I'm happy to do that too. I wish I would have had a little bit more guidance. Let me rephrase that. I wish I would have been open to more guidance when I was just starting out and getting into this career, because for me now, I want to be a provider for others.
That's wonderful, Nicole. Well, I expect that your business will continue experiencing a great deal of success. I respect the way you run your business. I'm excited about what we're doing working together.
Yes.
And I appreciate your willingness to uh, appear as a guest on our very first episode of Beyond the Inflection Point by Marion Street Capital. Um, I also want to thank our audience for making time to listen to today's conversation. And I'm personally looking forward to our future episodes and staying in touch with all those guests that appear on these episodes. Thanks,
Yes. Thank you
Nicole.
so much for having me.
You bet.